All right. Hey, everybody. Kirk and Bill here with the Kirk and Bill Show. And today is Friday, May 8th, and it's 1 o'clock. We are expecting to have a special guest today. We'll see if she does call in, and that will be Sara Meany from the Tourism Department or Department of Tourism for Wisconsin, and she is the secretary designee. And we have some good questions for her in regards to what's going to be happening here in Wisconsin with tourism. My good friend Bill is here with me today. And so, Bill, what's new with you on this beautiful Friday?
Well, what is new with me? I would love to say that I have a lot new that's going on, but strangely enough, last this week was a lot like last week. Spent a lot of time at home. Spent a lot of time with the kids and spent a lot of time outside. The weather was beautiful here in this part of the world, and I had a great text conversation with one of my very good friends from college, and we were talking about things that made us feel old. And we were talking about how if we sit in a chair for too long, it takes a little while to stand up. We talked about how we like to see the yellow finches come to our bird feeders, and that was getting old. And then I reminded him that it was going to frost, so he better cover his flowers. And he agreed. Now, he's one of the most decorated athletes that ever went to Gustavus Adolphus College, tremendous shot putter and discus thrower and hammer thrower. It was just, I was just dying having that conversation about getting old. And he's working from home right now, too. So the fact that when you're home, there's just not a lot else that's going on.
So one of the things that we wanted to talk about today was obviously tourism and kind of the status of what a lot of our friends who have businesses that related to tourism are dealing with, and hopefully we'll get our guest on to talk about it. But as it relates to St. Croix Falls, the St. Croix Valley, and Osceola, Amory, Polk County-ish. What are things that you are seeing in the tourism realm that have been kind of put on hold or canceled for the year, and how do you think that's going to affect economics for our area?
Well, I think it's kind of it's a scary thing. You start.
Uh-oh.
It would necessarily be a tourism thing, but that brings people from the outside in. And then you start getting into local festivals. You start getting into day trips and things. And the more that everything starts getting pushed out and canceled, the more it just feels like, and this is a feeling, it's not necessarily quantitative, that less people are going to be coming to the area this year. Now, driving around in the small amount that I do, it doesn't seem like there's less people going to their cabins. You still see plenty of vehicles pulling boats, pulling toys, motoring down Highway 8, going to enjoy time at the cabin. So that's good. The question is, will they just be going to the cabin, plunking down there, maybe stopping for groceries, maybe not, or will they be going to the cabin and coming into our local communities and spending money?
Right.
That's a big thing. Will people be coming to hit all the beautiful trails that we have in the parks, and spending money and eating and filling up and doing the whole bit, or are they just going to come, ride their bikes, hit the trails, and then head back to where they're from? So I have noticed a lot more people outside, again, anecdotally, but I don't know.
Hello, Sara. This is Kirk again. All right. I think we're all three on the line.
On my other line too.
All right. So, Bill, can you hear Sara?
I can.
Awesome.
Hi, Bill.
Well, great to have you on, everybody. We finally figured out our technical difficulties, and so thank you so much. So, Sara, we were just talking. I don't know if you were listening while you were having that conversation or while we were trying to connect, but we were just going through some of the ideas of the struggles of economics as a tourism related thing. But let's circle back just for a minute and introduce you. So you are the tourism secretary for the Department of Tourism in Wisconsin. So that's awesome. Tell us a little bit about you and how you got that job because you're appointed by the governor, right?
Yes,
So,
yes,
how did
I
you
am.
end up in that position? That's a pretty awesome
I still
position.
kind of I ask myself that question a couple times a week actually. How did I end up here? But no, I say that jokingly. First and foremost, I'm a Wisconsin native. I grew up in the Milwaukee area. I went to UW Madison, so I'm a Badger. And I left Wisconsin for a few years. I moved overseas. I lived in Ireland a few years. I'm a dual citizen, Irish and American. And then also lived in Colorado for a few years before coming back to Wisconsin to raise my family. I have 4 kids, and we live on the east side of Milwaukee. And my background, career-wise, is in business ownership and business leadership, but really advertising and marketing has been kind of a lead piece of that. And a lot of that was spent on travel and tourism-related brands in previous positions. And so there was a natural fit for the role of Secretary of Tourism. You know, the Department of Tourism is primarily a marketing and promotional driven state agency. It's our job to inspire people to experience Wisconsin, and we do that obviously by advertising, promotion, and making sure we are top of mind for target audiences. So that that fit made a lot of sense, certainly, but I was doing something else when I got a call from someone who said, I'm going to put your name in the hat for Secretary of Tourism. There had just been an election. Governor Tony Evers had been elected. And at the time, they were working to identify people who may be a good fit for some of these roles. And obviously, I needed to be at least considered and then interviewed. And I had never met Governor-elect at the time, Governor Tony Evers, until I was asked to interview with him. So that was a real honor to be considered and then ultimately be the one selected to be appointed to the position. So that's how it works. And it's a little bit like a Cinderella story, kind of, but in the scheme of things, it's a natural fit for my my professional experience and frankly also my passions. I'm an avid traveler and I love Wisconsin.
Yeah, I read in your bio that you did a lot of traveling, and so the dual citizenship is pretty cool. So do you have family that still lives there that gives you that dual citizenship, or is that something that your husband brought into the?
Well, I married into it, but what's interesting is my parents are both Irish citizen eligible. So my great grandparents, their grandparents, were born in Ireland.
Wow.
So had they sought citizenship at the time before I was born, I would have been born as an Irish citizen as well as an American. But I actually married an Irish citizen, and so it happened that way. So then the kids are also dual citizens, and I think it'll make for interesting choices when college decisions need to be made. But it's an interesting kind of little tidbit, right? And I always was raised as an Irish American, and knowing what it meant to be Irish American and have Irish roots. But I've always had the travel bug, and it was something, my family traveled by station wagon only. I spent very little time in an airplane until I was, a grown adult paying for my own plane tickets. So most of our experiences, on vacation and as tourists were in the United States in a big wood paneled station wagon. I was one of 4 kids. I am one of 4 kids. And so, most of that time I spent facing backwards as my parents drove forwards in one of those good old station wagons. So lots of Wisconsin was part of the exploration, and we had a heck of a collection of windshield state park stickers.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
we have a mutual friend who moved from Wisconsin to California, but his notoriety is that he was the mascot for the Irish at Notre Dame, and so he was.
Oh, no way.
So he loves to post pictures of him as the little Irish man, leprechaun.
Fighting Irish.
Yep. So that's a lot of fun, and his wife is from time to time listen. So if she's listening to the show today, we can say hi to Jamie, the former mascot for the Notre Dame, and that's a great school that they could go to.
Cool.
So
well, my old older brother actually finished his PhD at Notre Dame, so
Really?
I am a secondary fan as well.
That's awesome. Well, we're excited to have you on the show today, and the reason that I reached out was because St. Croix Falls, as you probably know, you were here. It's been a few months, but you were here for a
Yeah.
tourism conference put on by some of the folks at the Polk County
That's right.
tourism shop, and it was really, I had a chance to meet with you and listen to you speak. One of the things that we have in our area is a bug for tourism. We live right on the river. I think you did some rock climbing maybe on the river.
I did.
Yep.
Right at Interstate Park.
Yep. And I mean, that's part of our culture is the river, and that includes a lot of really great things like the canoeing, the climbing, the hiking. We of course have a great trail system. We're the city of trails. We have live theater. We have some phenomenal mountain biking trails for bikers. We have four-wheeler trails and snowmobile trails. And this pandemic is, of course, hurt our ability to utilize a lot of that. And so one of the things we want to do is celebrate the success that we've had and look forward to that success rebounding, talk a little bit about that, but also get some information that maybe would help or encourage people that have this as a business, that they are looking to people such as yourself and me as the mayor of St. Croix Falls, and Bill as a business consultant who gives great advice to businesses that are trying to make it and overcome these types of things. How do we do that? So first, let's talk about 2019. Some numbers just were released. I posted some pictures on our Facebook page, and it looks like the economic impact in Wisconsin from tourism was in the $22.2 billion range. Talk a little bit about that and how that affects us for last year and how that's going to work for next year.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Well, it's it's an interesting time to be celebrating a record year for Wisconsin tourism while we're going through just such a decimation of the industry right now. But 2019 was a record year, the largest year in at least a decade. That's as far back as we have these comparisons, specifically the way they're measured. But it tells us a lot about the demand for Wisconsin's tourism product and the continued pattern of growth that we've seen year over year for quite some time in Wisconsin tourism. So $22.2 billion of economic impact may sound like, well, how is that even possible? But when you think about it, now we are seeing exactly how that's possible. As soon as travel stops and people stopped moving around and frequenting, restaurants or going on weekend trips or coming into the state and spending their dollars and staying overnight in hotels and going to events and fairs and festivals and all those things, many other businesses are directly impacted by that, whether it's the supply chain, grocery supplies, products and services. All of these things are immediately impacted as soon as travel stops. So, it's an interesting time to be needing to tell the story of what is the impact of tourism on our state, because we as residents are also tourists, much like, I was there rock climbing, at Interstate Park and, spent my dollars while I'm there, and those dollars go into the businesses themselves for paychecks and sustaining the community. So it really is a cycle of support when people move around the state and come into the state to enjoy what we have to offer. So, that the tourism industry actually supports just over 202,000 full-time and part-time jobs in tourism-related positions, and that economy results in $1.6 billion in state and local taxes that, of course, go back into our communities and the services that we receive through government. So what we're doing is sustaining the economy of the state. It's one of the largest economies in the state of Wisconsin, even though when you think of tourism, You may not think of all of the different sectors and verticals that make up tourism, but and then the other thing to keep in mind is when travel stopped and when we all needed to be safer at home, hotel and lodging took an immediate hit, as did things like specialty retail and restaurants and service organizations and things like that. But when people aren't staying in hotels, you have no room tax collections. Room tax collections are often the bread and butter that support local and regional destination marketing organizations like a Convention and Visitors Bureau or a Chamber of Commerce, which, of course, those organizations are the engine that help bring people back into those specific communities to spend dollars again. So what we're seeing is kind of a compounded negative impact on the tourism industry with the loss of room tax dollars and the loss of dollars coming into the businesses themselves. So, those DMOs have been really hard hit. So we're working really hard to shake the trees for financial assistance where it may be available, both from federal stimulus dollars through grants that our department actually oversees, and then also leveraging marketing activities on behalf of our local and regional partners in ways that may have never been done before. So now, how big has tourism been hit? Well, in the last 8 weeks alone, the U.S. Travel Association reports that Wisconsin has seen a loss in travel spending of $1.5 billion in 8 weeks. So,
Wow.
Without question, travel and travel-related spending in the state, that basically equates to the amount of state and local taxes we collected in total as a result of tourism last year. That's a massive and abrupt halt to, revenue coming into the state. So, and those CVBs and chambers are reporting upwards of $13 million lost in room tax revenue. So, those operations are going to struggle to survive. Many of them have taken a massive hit, already laying people off or furloughing people or taking a budget reduction or pay reduction in order to try to keep those businesses afloat and keep the lights on for when we can welcome people back and start to travel again. So it's a little bit of a sad COVID sandwich, really. 2019 was so strong. It's proof that Wisconsin tourism was alive and well and growing, and actually, that momentum was continuing in significant ways. And 2020 was shaping up to be one of the biggest years for Wisconsin on top of that, with many massive events that a lot of us were looking forward to seeing the impact throughout the state. And while those things are still up in the air, there's a lot of wait and see what happens. Tons of events have already been canceled. So
Right.
hundreds of millions of dollars that would come into our communities through conventions, special events, tournaments, and those annual events that we all look forward to attending, those are hundreds of millions of dollars, and that translates locally to a lot of sad feelings, right? So the work that we have ahead of us is going to be focused on rebuilding, and we have to rebuild with fewer dollars, and that's going to make that rebuild slower and probably more difficult than it would otherwise. One of the things, though, because I don't want to be all bummer all the time, I'm actually looking for the silver lining. And while I don't think it's, out of every bad situation, comes a good learning, it's actually a bit refreshing to look at the national trends data, which seems to indicate that Wisconsin may be better positioned than many other states to be able to rebound in terms of attracting visitors and bringing dollars back to the state when it's safe to travel again. And here are a few of those stats. So there's an organization called Longwoods International. They're a partner of ours, but they partner with a lot of CVBs and state tourism entities for data collection and research. And they've been doing a weekly traveler sentiment study that gives us a sense of how our consumer, leisure travelers thinking about the impact of COVID on their travel plans. So over those 8 weeks, we've kind of seen, a massive drop in travel plans. So about half of people have canceled travel plans because of COVID-19. I'm among them. Obviously, in the past 8 weeks, we're not going anywhere.
Sure.
but also plans for future travel people have canceled for the same reasons. But of those people who still have plans to travel, many of them have shifted from international to domestic. They don't want to get on a plane, and from domestic air travel to domestic road trip travel. And that's at about 25% of people who still intend to travel are saying they're, instead of flying, they're planning on taking a road trip somewhere they can reach by car instead. Now, here's where we see the optimism coming in. Wisconsin is very well positioned to welcome people for road trip destination travel. That's largely where the bulk of our tourism has come from in the past anyway. We have opportunities to attract regional target audience travel from the Midwest, upper Midwest, and that is a really strong market for us. But we also have some opportunities to expand into some of those markets because of this opportunity, and also for an opportunity to potentially recoup the dollars that we know are lost already. But the other thing that is in Wisconsin's favor is the pure nature of Wisconsin's natural offering. Wisconsin's one of the top drivers of tourism to the state of Wisconsin has been outdoor recreation. That's something people know us for, and that's something people come back here for. And when you think of what our two of our largest target markets, two very large metropolitan areas, Minneapolis and Chicago, the offering that we have in Wisconsin is both accessible and affordable, but also very social distancing friendly. So when you think about our state parks, our trails, our natural lands, our recreation areas, our two Great Lakes, and a mighty Mississippi River, we are the ultimate destination at a time when people may not want to be hanging out in a big city and in large crowds. And so that hasn't changed. That piece of what Wisconsin is for people in their hearts and minds as a destination continues to be the case. Now, we need to balance that interest and that potential influx of dollars into these smaller communities around the state with safety and health guidance.
Right.
So that, it's one thing to say, fine, we're open for travel and tourism and you can come to our rural communities and our forests and our streams, but we also have to make sure that statewide, we are all following best practices and guidances to make sure our businesses, our workers, and our visitors can stay safe and healthy. So that is kind of, in a nutshell, how we're focusing on what's possible for a rebound and a recovery, what's the work that we need to do in order to do that safely, and how do we work with our partners and stakeholders around the state in the tourism industry, but then how do we leverage marketing to our advantage to bring people back in the safest and most impactful way.
So Sara,
take a breath, because that was a lot of words.
Yeah, thank you for all that. I have respect for someone who can hold a conversation and continue to make sense. So I understood everything you said. So good, great job. If I did that, people would scratch their head. So on that note, when we talk about the room tax money, our chamber director is listening to this show, and she mentioned that we use our room tax money to inspire people to come here, and we fund. We have a great website that we've promoted on here, the stcroixvalley.com, that basically highlights all of the activities that we can do inside and outside and all around throughout the valley. In addition to that, they also help with a lot of signage and advertising for local businesses, all those different things. And I know that the room tax has been hit extremely hard over the last several months. And so when I look at that from the perspective of a city leader, knowing that that is not going to be available in the future to use to advertise, so that'll have to be made up somewhere else if we are going to advertise. And then I look at the gas tax and the fact that my wife hasn't had to fill her car up for 3 weeks because, we just don't go anywhere, as well as the sales tax and all those different things that are typically going to supplement my property tax bill. and just realizing that there's probably going to not be a big change in our budgets. Our city budget, the police department's not going to use less resources or money, the fire department, and all those things. But there's going to be less money available from the state and from sales tax, gas tax, things like that. So what, as you look at where things are at, I'm a firefighter. So in terms of a fire, right now
I was an EMT in college.
Yeah, it's
I'm with you.
we're in that emergency phase right now where I'm seeing businesses kind of burn down, and they're worried about being able to stay open for another week. Many businesses have already just said we're done, and they're they're probably going to get into a different field for a while. What is the forecast look like from someone who's in in the conversations, maybe with the governor? When can we expect to see things? That's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah, I wish I had the special sight goggles. I wish the governor did. I wish we all did,
right,
so that we could plan and anticipate. The answer actually isn't in tea leaves. It's actually in the trend data,
right,
based on the public health guidance, gating criteria that have been laid out very clearly in both in Badger Bounce Back, but by Department of Health Services, as they talked about. It's one thing for us to stay home and stay healthy, but to resume normal activity, or air quotes normal activity, we still have to make sure that we can contain and reduce risk of spread of the virus. So, it's kind of an interesting conundrum for Polk County community, or communities that that haven't been as largely impacted as other areas of our state or other areas of the country. When you start thinking about what happens when you ungate people and your offering is largely an influx of people and their dollars, we have to think about how do we still maintain that curve reduction? How do we still ensure that communities with, limited healthcare resources, or not enough PPE yet, or not enough testing capacity yet, how do we make sure that an influx of people does not result in an increase in cases and a spread around the state? And that's one of the top concerns involved in what's the timing of this, and what does safety look like? What does safety mean?
That's one of the things. Yeah. Before you jumped on, that's one of the things we were talking about, is the struggle that especially in smaller towns are having with end of the summer, Labor Day type gatherings or events. It seems premature at some level to cancel them right now. But it's just the struggle of how do you weigh all of this out, and that's assuming that safer at home is phased into something else, and we can start gathering again. It's a super complex thing to handle, especially in a smaller community.
It is, and especially when the reliance on events to draw people into the community is such a piece of the toolkit, right? So,
right.
That's something that we're regularly having conversations with our partners all over the state to think about, and what other tools do we have available in the short term, but what might it look like in the midterm is probably the hardest piece of this. And while it's easy to say and hard to do, being as creative as we can be to identify the things that are reasonably safe to promote once travel is either encouraged or at least mildly allowed, we have to balance risk with reward. That's why you're hearing it across all over the country, but particularly in Wisconsin, you hear the governor refer to turning it like a dial, not a switch. If you turn it like a switch and you say everybody free for all, go wherever you want, do whatever you want, and pack into the crowds and all of those types of things, we don't have it under control. No one has it under control yet. It isn't a Wisconsin thing or a Polk County thing or a Milwaukee County thing. It's this virus is still spreadable and will spread if you have someone who is infected, and particularly those who don't know that they are. So, that's the reality that we're faced with. This isn't some drill. It's not an experiment. That's the hardest part about this is you feel unaffected until you are. And I don't mean by the illness. I mean by the impact that it has on our society and our commerce and our businesses and our lives. So, it's, I go back to the first question you asked me on this call, on this program, which is, well, how did you get to be, the Secretary of Tourism? And I think about those days before that, where it was, I had a lot of questions about what does this mean to do this job, and why would I be good for it, and what is it going to mean for my life and my family, and how can I have a positive impact? Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that 2019 would be the biggest year for Wisconsin tourism under my leadership, and 2020 would be the hardest. And it's really a whiplash moment, and we're all experiencing that in our own ways. But meanwhile, I'm at the helm of the state tourism industry, trying to shake trees wherever I can for financial support for our DMOs to identify and help the businesses in our tourism reliant communities, to connect them to both loans or federal financial assistance where it's available, partnering with other state agencies to identify how do we either ease the pain or leverage resources where they exist. And then also, how do we simultaneously prepare for shifting what has normally and traditionally been done, which is get ready for a really big summer season and market the heck out of it. But instead, telling people not to travel, but dream about Wisconsin. Imagine when you can be here. Here are the the planning tools and resources available so that when you can travel, you want to come here. While also at the same time saying, how do we prepare our businesses and communities for the things they're going to need when we do open again, whether it's gloves or PPE or barriers or, reduced capacity or reduced schedules or, reduction in events. It was unfathomable even 8 weeks ago for any of us. And yet we're all going through it together. The timeline is going to be the most impossible question for any of us to answer, but the timeline is completely dependent on those health gating criteria, those public health achievements, which is, do we have enough equipment? Do we have enough testing? Do we have enough healthcare services available to not provide crisis care levels, but instead best standards of care level? And when we can reach those milestones, we go from safer at home to phase one.
So Sara,
and we have to maintain those levels, right? So it's, what about events? That's the question. What about events? Well, events are gatherings of people. When is it safe to bring chunks of people together? Only after we have control over the spread of the virus.
So is there a point at which the state has to make that decision, as far as if this continues on, through the fall, and we find out that it, is like the flu, for instance? Is there a point?
You mean like a resurgence?
Yeah, I mean, many of us who live in Polk County realize that we are not Milwaukee, and so Milwaukee has a much bigger issue with this, and so some people feel a little bit more protected, or like they're not as affected. I see a lot of people out walking around, and just, it seems like they've gone back. Our county has made a pretty big statement from a county level with a resolution, basically asking the governor to rescind this and be more regional with it. And our sheriff put out some things that made the news. Many people agree with those ideas, that we are not a big city that is affected by this, and that our jobs are just being decimated, our economy, and that type of thing. Is there a point at which the state will look at it and say, this is something we're going to have to live with, and we can't stay in our houses for another year? because that's what a lot of people are afraid of is what if this never, what if this is the new normal and every year we're going to still have this on there. We have to be able to make money and feed our families and and do things.
Well, it's interesting. So some of what, and I know we're all probably reading many of the same things, and the perspectives are coming from all different angles. Well, and I certainly cannot predict or speak on behalf of the governor. I know he has communicated his willingness to look at all sorts of different ways of imagining what reopening and transition looks like. Just today, I think around 11 a.m., the guideline documents for the reopening of businesses in, I want to say 8 verticals, I know there are more coming as well, have been created and released so that businesses can work on preparing for the types of equipment and types of processes and procedures they're going to need to have in place when they do reopen. So all of these things continue to make progress. But when it comes to the regionalization of things, I'm going to speak only to the tourism aspect of that, because I think it actually does a pretty good job of demonstrating the point. So if Polk County opens up, and meaning businesses, the businesses and, the sort of closer to normal daily life, and shops are opening and following reopening procedures, but businesses don't in another area of the state, the people in that other area of the state are free to move about the state. And it is the people themselves who move and carry the virus with them. So the idea of having protective equipment and barriers and social distancing is going to be a normal for us for a while. But what you're not doing by reopening one section over another when it comes to tourism, as soon as you open up and start encouraging people to come to your region, they are coming from outside the region. And then
Right.
Your argument for regional reopening is moot.
Yeah, we've definitely had that.
That's really challenging,
Right.
The whole point of tourism is to get people that don't live by you to come to you. How do you safely do that?
Yeah.
One of our biggest markets is Minneapolis.
They only count as tourists if they came from 90 miles or further.
Right.
So the very definition is not from here. So it's a thought exercise more than it is. It's certainly not a policy statement. It's a thought exercise. Right. To think through what is the impact of that type of approach within the context of tourism, and what that means for the businesses and the workers and the people in the community itself, is that we're actually all in the same pool. We're all swimming in the same pool. We're just in different sections of the pool right now. And it isn't the answer any of us want. But that's actually the answer that is prevailing now for that reason. Because when we move through the pool, people get sick. So I'm looking for ways to ensure that we have our businesses and communities as ready as possible.
Right.
Or when the light does turn green, which will be determined by whatever the determination is going to be. We know there are a few factors playing in that right now. And that way we can do the best to make sure people can be as safe and remain healthy as possible. So that's what those guideline documents really reflect. And those were created in conjunction with, of course, the Department of Health Services, WEDC, who was tasked with, kind of gathering and pulling it all together. But the Department of Ag, Trade and Consumer Protection, as well as Department of Tourism, worked with all of our stakeholders. The associations that are, of course, the connecting dots between CMOs, CVBs, restaurants, hotel and lodging, attractions, natural parks, all of those types of things. We actually engaged the leaders of those organizations to weigh in. They are the experts in how best to run these businesses and these industries. And it's their voice that then can be seen in the recommendations that came out in these guidelines. There are more to come. Everyone's trying to work through all of them and get them reviewed and all of that. But that's an important thing to keep in mind, that, these guidances that are coming out are actually put together in conjunction with the industry itself.
So Sara, we're kind of we're understanding that this is a lot of question marks and that there's no straight answers. In the midst of this whole thing, I think what a lot of shop owners, a lot of tour companies, live theater companies are looking for is maybe a little bit of hope in protecting their business, staying afloat long enough so that they can hopefully rebound. You introduced through an email today something called the Local Chamber Tourism and 501c6 Protection Act.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that does for those entities and how it will affect them moving forward if that is passed?
Yeah, I am happy to. So this is happening at the federal level. It is currently being circulated. It is co-sponsored right now by two folks from each political party. So right now it's very bipartisan support. What it is it is meant to, let me back up. 501c6s are largely the business designation of convention and visitors bureaus and chambers of commerce and a handful of other entities like that. Many, for the most part, 501c6s were actually not eligible for a lot of the federal stimulus dollar packages. So, for example, the Paycheck Protection Program did not include 501c6s. They were not eligible. Some of the emergency disaster loan approach made it really difficult for 501c6s. Several of the loan packages were available, but loans are, of course, dependent on the ability to actually back them up. So 501c6s were largely left out of a lot of the chunks of federal stimulus, while also being compounded by the fact that their room tax revenues were decimated. So I've been trying to be the squeaky wheel, but the U.S. Travel Association, which is the national association in support of destination marketing organizations, has been working really hard at the federal level to identify that gap and remediate that gap. So that's what this particular bill is intended to do. It would allow 501c6s to become eligible for the next round of PPP, which then could help actually sustain, part of the operation that has been lost or decimated by lack of room tax dollars and few other federal stimulus opportunities. So it's really important that people, if they want to see that become a possibility, they can reach out and ask their representatives either to co-sponsor or to be in favor of, as this progresses through the legislative process. So this is a big deal. It's new as of this week. So the next round of PPP may potentially become a support possibility for 501c6s if that becomes a reality. And we wanted to get that word out as quickly as possible. It's one of a handful of things that we are looking into and trying to pursue to make sure that Wisconsin knows, the Wisconsin tourism industry knows what's available and possible. And then another thing that we're encouraging people to look into is the economic development, the EDA grant pathway, which a new offering, a new grant extension because of the CARES Act was made available and announced as of yesterday through the Economic Development Administration. And these grant packages are available for construction and non-construction projects. They are available to state and county government entities as well as nonprofits. And they can be used to actually, the wording is very specifically for, in response to economic injury as a result of COVID. And it is understood that EDA grant program does have the potential to be used for tourism promotion activities and potentially tourism development activities through economic, regional economic programs. So, that's what I mean when I say shaking the trees. We're trying to find any tree that has the potential package available for the tourism industry to tap into, to pursue individually, or for us to pursue on behalf of the state and our stakeholders. So those are two federal opportunities that have just become available this week.
So Sara, what are you have a lot of places that have canceled already. So we have a huge festival down in Osceola, south of us, that decided to cancel. I know that they had a lot of things that they had to get in order for it to be a successful event, and they could not, likely would be my guess, they could not put the deposits down and risk all of that and get confirmations to make it a successful event. There are still some events that are in play. Does the Wisconsin Department of Tourism have a way for those types of events to promote themselves as they try and stay afloat? Do you guys do promotions for local events like our city festival or our music festival that's coming up in August?
Yeah, our grant program, there's the GEM grant program, which is the Joint Effort Marketing program, which is a grant program that has been in existence for quite some time. Has a portion of it that makes eligible promotion for events. And so that piece is available. And in fact, the most recent grant round, I'm not using the right terminology, the submission deadline was very recently. I know there's a round of grants being reviewed by the GEM Grant Review Committee right now. That does include examples of events that people are seeking to find promotional support for. And that's exactly it's one of three categories, basically, that the GEM grant program supports. It includes destination marketing activities. So it could be regional activity to increase awareness of the offering in an area. So that might be a general advertising program. It can be a sales promotion specifically around a product or an activity or a specific place, or it could be event-based, which is in support of the advertising and promotional spend to promote attendance to that event from outside of the local area. So that's how those are structured.
Okay. And so as we are, going through this kind of unusual situation, hopefully our local chambers of commerce and local marketing arms, as well as statewide through what you guys do, we're hoping to be able to tag on and put our calendar events on your calendar events and things like that. So
yes, absolutely. That's something we always have as well. We have an event listing that is generally updated by our partners around the state, and we maintain that through travelwisconsin.com. So as events began being canceled, we were seeking that cancellation information, but also as they are either scheduled or sustained or being scheduled for the future, that event schedule continues to be sustained.
All right. Well, I think that we have a bright future ahead of us. We've had some challenging times, and obviously, our hope is that we can rebound from this strong and quickly. Julie Fox put up a link to sign up for the Travel Wisconsin News e-newsletter. And so if people want more information about the industry and tourism in general, they can get that information, and then they can always go to travelwisconsin.com as well. So I think that
absolutely, travelwisconsin.com is a great place for people to go and plan their future travel as well. We all do need reason for hope and optimism, and planning for an upcoming trip in the future is an important part of that too. So we have loads of resources and some fun distraction games on our website as well. So I hope everyone takes the opportunity to check it out. And please stay healthy. Thanks for the opportunity to have the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sara, for being a part of our show. And
yes, thank you.
Sorry for all the technical difficulties. This is a learning curve. We'll definitely have to iron that out.
That's right.
Yeah. So thank you so much, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again soon. And from those of you that are still with us, thank you for sticking with us through this longer show. kind of ran into some technical difficulties. So as you re-listen to that, just give a little grace. And thank you very much for the opportunity, Bill, to meet with you on a Friday. It is gorgeous out there. I hope you get out and enjoy some things with your kids and your wife. And you got any big plans for the weekend?
I have no big plans for the weekend. It was my 9th anniversary yesterday, so we celebrated by getting food from the Dallas house and sitting and eating it at home. And, it was a little different way to celebrate an anniversary, like many have. And we have birthdays coming up, so it's, it's just going to be a quiet weekend around this house as we're waiting for baby Tease number 3 to arrive in the next 6 weeks or so. No, not 6 weeks, month. It's coming quickly.
It's coming real quick.
I guess it's the beginning of May. Again, it's Blur's Day for a lot of people, but we're continuing on. So we're the long-term forecast. The weather looks warm at the end of next week. So I'm like you, just trying to find little positive signs.
Yeah, well, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to hear that. And when little baby Tease does come, you'll have to introduce him to us. And maybe as you take a little bit of time off, we'll find a stand-in host that can join as you take some time with your family. But thank you very much. For everyone that's out there, stay safe, stay well, and we'll look forward to coming back with some good news in the coming days. And we look forward to a great weekend. Get out there, enjoy the trails. Get out there and enjoy some restaurants, support your local economy, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.